Make sure. Okay, I just want to make sure everybody is back. All right. So this is something that we like to do at the beginning of all our general meetings, only because it gives us an opportunity. We have so many people coming in and out, and new people for that matter, and we want to know about the work that is being done in their community, and because we understand that this is hard work. And so that's why we give us an opportunity to network, an opportunity to look at what is being done in other places. Perhaps this is something that you can bring home. Perhaps there's better practices out there that we need to learn from. So having said that, if anybody wants to share real quick what their experience was like in their breakout room, I'll take one or two. Light Noreen.
Sorry, it came up with my name backwards. It's Noreen Light. I met two nice women who both have expertise in financial aid, Sheila and Tori. And Tori works at the Pelican Bay Prison outside of, near the College of the Redwoods. And yeah, just good to have those two names to tuck in the back of my head as we have legislation on the agenda at the Washington State Legislature right now that would allow our incarcerated students to access their Pell Grants that they've been eligible since last July. So good to have two more contacts to ask questions of. Thank you very much.
That's wonderful. And Noreen, where are you from?
I'm from Washington State.
Okay.
I travel in the winters. I'm retired now from higher education, and so I am joining you from a laundry room in Florida, where I am using a wall charger and going to meetings. So thank you.
So you're from Washington State and you're in Florida. You're like at both extremes of the country right now.
Yes.
Welcome to this space, and we're glad to have you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Happening in Washington State, so we admire that.
Thank
you. All right, we'll take one more. Christy.
Hi there. So I got to meet Trip Taylor. He's been out for 6 months and is another Washington person. So he helped build the higher ed and prison program in Idaho, but now he's in Washington. And so if anyone can reach out to him, looks like we have a lot of Washington people. That'd be great. Welcome to the space.
Wonderful. Wonderful. All right, and with that, we're gonna open up to our speaker series. What we have incorporated late last year, and we hope to continue on this year, is to highlight our membership and that great membership and the talent that we have in each of our members. And so every month we highlight a person and the work that they're doing in their community, and so we can learn from them, and we can learn from what is being done, what best practices can be brought. And today this month we have Sheila Meiman, and she's coming to us with great knowledge. I have to say, she's been with us for the very beginning. So she is an expert in this space. She's an expert in this community. Sheila has been working with Unlock Higher Education and everything having to do with Unlock Higher Education, for that matter, in many areas. And today she's coming to us to speak about the FAFSA form and the changes when it comes to getting financial aid. Sheila?
Thanks, Judith. It's nice to see everyone here. Financial aid is one of those truly unpopular topics until somebody actually needs to pay for college. It's an interesting area because it is one of the most detailed, weedy, technical parts of going to college. And colleges are very, very, very focused on being compliant with about 30 million regulations about financial aid. And the Department of Education tries very hard, I think, to present a face to students that hides some of that weediness and tech-heavy stuff from the student and allows them to participate. But this year's an interesting year because for the first time in many, many years, there's been a fundamental shift in how financial aid is applied for and administered. And it's throwing everyone in the country in a tizzy. So we're going to talk a little bit about paying for college, what it looks like if you're on the outside, what it looks like if you're on the inside, how you attach yourself to financial aid, and just some things to think about. So when you're on the outside, one of the first things we can think about is what the expenses are for college. And colleges produce a number called a cost of attendance. And it looks across an academic year, which is usually, starts in September because college starts in the fall for most students. It includes tuition that either the college or the state set. It includes fees. And fees can mean lots and lots of different things. There are fees on the outside for parking. There are fees on the outside for labs. There are all kinds of fees. And every college may have a basket of fees that they present to the student as part of the cost of attendance. There's housing, there's food, there's transportation, there's books, materials, supplies, equipment like laptops, things. And then there are other expenses that are required by students in the program. So this whole basket of expenses that creates something called a cost of attendance. And cost of attendance is an important piece of information for a student, but it's an important piece of the administration of financial aid for the college. And then there's this ecosystem of instruments that can be used to pay for your cost of attendance in college. There are savings that a student may have or a family may have. There's working while you're in college. There are grants and scholarship, and many of those are what are called merit-based aid, which means depending on your academic record, depending on a scholarship application, et cetera, you may be offered a scholarship to help offset the cost of going to school. There are private loans that people take out. There are institutional aid grants. So think about a college, they have some amount of resources, some amount of money that they've accumulated somehow. And many of the privates have endowments from donors, and they produce applications and students can apply for institutional aid. There are other benefits that help pay for college, like veterans benefits, things like that. But basically, you've got gift aid in the form of grants and scholarships, you have loans, and then you have work. Now, there's federal financial aid on top of all those other things, and that's really what I'm going to focus on more today. Federal financial aid is not merit-based, it's needs-based. It's income sensitive. So it looks at you as an individual, or if you're a youth a person under the age of 24, it looks at your family's income and assets. And it looks at the status you were at in what's called the prior year. That doesn't even sound grammatically correct. That's just an odd way there is of saying, yes, we're talking about aid for 24-25. So students applying now are applying for aid for a school that starts in September, which is 2024. So most of the questions they answer are going to be about their financial circumstances in 2022. That's just the way it works. So you're going to see forms and questions about your taxes and your assets and your information from 2022. One of the big sources of federal financial aid is something called a Pell Grant. And a Pell Grant was established to support the students with the most financially challenging situation. It's a very, very important part of paying for college for students who don't have a lot of money or assets. There are other kinds of federal financial aid. There's some other grants that colleges that can administer and get funding for. And then there are federal loans, and these are very different than private loans. Federal loans come in either a subsidized or an unsubsidized version. Subsidized means that the federal government, while you're in school, does things like help pay the interest so you don't start paying interest till you leave school. They also have unsubsidized loans that have a favorable interest rate that you have to pay. And then they also administer a program called Work Study, which is basically performing work that the university or college hires you to do. And you get awarded the ability to work a certain number of hours or to earn a certain amount of money to help you offset your cost of attendance. So all of those things are part of this basket of instruments of financial aid. One of the things college students need to do when they're thinking about college is go on to each school that they're applying to and look at their website, try to find the shopping sheet or financial aid sheet that tells them what the actual cost of going to that school is. Now, if you're inside when you start education, both the cost of attendance and the type of aid you can get are more limited. So when you're inside, the federal government has determined that the only things that can be calculated in your cost of attendance are your tuition, the fees, the books, materials, supplies, equipment, and a professional license that you may be required to get. That's all that we're able to look at for cost of attendance. And there's a more limited set of instruments of financial aid. So there's still Pell. In some cases, in some states, there are still state aid grants that are similar to Pell. They're gift money and they're income-based that are available to people incarcerated. Other states are still working on their advocacy to remove old prohibitions that say state aid is not available to people who are incarcerated. So that's been a moving target and something Unlock has advocated for with our members for a long time, that we see relief in those prohibitions so that people who are incarcerated can have access to state aid grants also. And some of the other standard forms of aid are available. What's not available to people who are incarcerated are loans. They're not allowed to get new loans. Kim just said, sorry, she's late. Hi, Kim. You're welcome anytime, no matter how late you are.
I adore you. Thank you.
I adore you too. It's okay. Anyway, so the FAFSA is the entry document to financial aid opportunities. And we see questions all the time. I know I'm not going to qualify for aid. Do I have to do the FAFSA? In most cases, colleges are going to say yes, because it's a very convenient form to gather information about the student so that they can think, even if the student doesn't qualify for some things like Pell Grants, the school may use it to make institutional aid decisions and things like that. So usually colleges are going to say, you want anything? You want a scholarship? Do the FAFSA, even if it's not something you're going to expect need-based aid for. And the FAFSA has always been one of those rite of passage documents that on the outside, even parents go to fill it out with their student. I mean, Judith was just sobbing the other day. It was embarrassing when she was trying to help her kids. It's difficult. It asks you questions you go, I don't understand. I don't know. What do I do with that one? So in 24-25, we're seeing the implementation, the first full implementation of something called FAFSA simplification. And sometimes those of us in the business have called it FAFSA complification. So as we're in a growing pain phase right now with that. It is just being introduced. And if you've ever been in the software business, which I'm an engineer, I've spent most of my life in the software business. The first introduction of something new, system-wise, has growing pains, and we're in a growing pain phase right now. But it is intended to make it simpler for the student. And it's also intended to do two other things: to better serve the most financially challenged students, so to make sure that aid is more available to students who need it the most, and to make available more predictability and clarity of how much aid you can expect to get. Because it's always been, I have no clue if I'll qualify for anything. How am I supposed to plan? Should I even try to apply to this college? Is there any chance? I know what my resources are, et cetera. Now, for those of us who serve students who are currently incarcerated or students who have recently come home, we know their need level is extremely high. And I almost think even more of people who are reentering. Like Trip, you said you've been home 6 months, right? I'm going to pick on you and use you as an example for a minute. To determine need, if you were trying to be a college student, it would look at things like your income prior year when you were inside. We want to serve people who have very, very little access to money, and people coming home are so fundamentally financially I don't want to use the word strapped, but they're so limited. There are so many things that need your attention financially at the beginning. And financial aid for college is such a critical part of being able to engage in education. And that so much applies too to students who started education inside, come home, want to be able to continue it. So the fact the FAFSA simplification is being even more aware of financial need for those students who are the most challenged financially is really important for both our inside and our returning population. But of course, there are complications. First of all, in colleges that are administering this aid, you will find more gray hair in the financial aid offices this year than ever. This has been a tremendously challenging implementation for offices. We serve financial aid offices, and I hear a lot of crying out there in the world. Anything new is an adaptation. So it's difficult for some of the users trying to fill it out. It's difficult for the colleges. There are lots of technical challenges. There are timing challenges. Normally, the FAFSA is available at the beginning of October, the year before it's going to start the following September. This year, because of all the changes, they were legislatively, statutorily required to have it available at the end of December instead of October, moved out to December. And under the December 31st we just finished, they did begin a soft launch, but it's been a rolling bring it up. It's not all the way there. They're tracking errors and problems with the system. But the bottom line is, because of some of the design, there are going to be less questions to answer, more automatic completion of information, etc. Now, there are different challenges if you're doing the FAFSA online versus paper, without a doubt. So we'll talk a little bit about those differences, but right now there's a processing lag. Judith, if you had filled out the FAFSA all the way with your kids last week, I will tell you that is not being processed in the background yet by the Department of Education. They've said they're trying by the end of the month, and it may push out a bit beyond that, to start processing that aid application and producing the document that travels to the colleges that you've asked for it to be sent to. And until those colleges get that document, they can't start doing what we call packaging, which is saying, oh, maybe this much Pell, this much institutional aid, offer this much work study, here are some loans, here are some other things, and let's present a financial aid package to the student. The work of doing that packaging can't happen until they get the document from the Department of Education. And right now, those documents aren't flowing yet. We know, too, that people who are doing them on paper, like many of our inside students, those aren't being entered and processed yet. And so aid offices are going, yeah, I know you did the FAFSA 3 weeks ago, but they haven't sent it to me yet. I don't have the answers yet. And that's creating all kinds of anxiety in parents and students that are trying to say, I need to pick a college. I was accepted to these 4. I'm going to make my decision based on how much aid I get at the college. And I haven't gotten the answer. And so it's creating a very anxious state of affairs right now. And prison education programs are going like, we sent it in. Does anything come back? Like, how are we supposed to do this? So there are those challenges happening right now. Now, there's some very new aspects in financial aid in 24-25. First of all, there's a concept called approval or consent. It used to be you had to spend a lot of time going through your prior year's taxes, pulling out numbers, typing in your numbers, hopefully getting it right, checking all your old W-2s, adding things, subtracting things. It was unpleasant, is a good way to put it. Because of FAFSA simplification and something called the Future Act that were passed a couple of years ago, there is now a direct data exchange with the IRS. But that data exchange won't happen unless every user of the FAFSA provides consent for that information to flow over. And so one of the things, whether you're online or whether you're on paper, is that you'll be asked to provide consent to access your formal tax information and have it transferred over. That tax information is highly, highly private, and it's ruled by different privacy concerns than normal academic information is. So there's lots of stuff that happens in the background to find ways to protect that information. Another concept, another word that's different is the word contributor. And contributors can be a student's spouse, they can be a student's parent, they can be a student's step-parent. And there are questions depending on the role of the age of the student, the marital status of the student, and a bunch of other factors that may result in an invitation being sent, if you're using the online FAFSA, to another person to have them fill out their portion of the FAFSA and to provide their consent for money to flow. And who the parent is one of the most complicated questions for many families right now. If you have two parents who are married to each other and file jointly, it's really easy. You pick one, they fill it out, the tax information comes over, you're done. If you have two parents who are not married or do not file jointly, or you have two parents, or you only have one parent, or all kinds of questions like that, it becomes a little more complicated to find out who the parent of record is. But who that parent is has changed. Always before, it's who you lived with most of the year. Now, it's who provided more of your financial support. And that's a very different thing sometimes. So you may live with mom, but dad may be paying child support that's providing more than half your support. If so, dad becomes the financial parent of record on the FAFSA. Before, it would have been mom. And so the routing of all that has become much more complicated and is still, NAFSA spends a lot of time working with the Department of Education. And there's still some weedy questions we have about how that all flows. There's a concept that's brand new for students who are under 24, and it's something called unusual circumstances. And it lets a student, including students who are completing it on paper, it allows those students to say, I have unusual circumstances. I can't contact my parents. I don't know where my parents are. I have a fundamental break in relationship with my parents. I am incarcerated and it would cause a risk to me if I contact. I mean, there are all kinds of things that can automatically have a college open a conversation with the student about making a professional judgment about whether that student can be considered independent. That whole world of unusual circumstances is new. There's lots of new terminology. You no longer get an expected family contribution. You get a student aid index. You no longer get a SAR. You get a FAFSA submission summary. And there's all kinds of calculation differences behind the scenes. Some of those calculation differences are great, though, because how much money you get depends on a couple things. It depends on the cost of attendance at your college. You can't get more Pell than your cost of attendance number that your college publishes. It also depends on your personal financial circumstances. It looks at your prior year, 2022. It looks at whether federal benefits are received in 22 or 23. So things like SNAP or Medicaid or TANF or WIC. And it depends on something called enrollment intensity. Are you full-time or are you only taking 3 credits this semester? And that slides the amount of aid you get. Now, for 23-24, if you were at the most financially challenged level and you were going full-time, you're a full-time student in fall and spring, the whole academic year, and the college cost of attendance was at least the amount of maximum available Pell, you might qualify over the course of the year, both semesters, for $7,395. That was the maximum amount of Pell in 23-24. Now for 24-25, the maximum Pell isn't yet established, but it's probably going to sit somewhere in that range. So let's just use that $7,395 and pretend we know that's going to be 24-25. It may be a little off from that. We don't know yet. It's not published. But now your financial status is impacted by the poverty tables that are published. So, for example, and this really is important for somebody just coming home or inside. Let's say you're independent. You're over 24, or you've been granted independence based on your unusual circumstances. You're not a parent, you're not married. You live in one of the lower 48 states. So you have a family size of 1. In 2022, the poverty guidelines say that a poverty level is anybody who earns under $13,590. The way Pell is calculated, if you are a full-time student for both semesters and your cost of attendance is high enough at that college, if you make up to 175% of those poverty levels, so again, that person who's a household family size of 1 makes under $23,783. How many people inside do you know that make $23,783 a year? Thank you, Trip. 0. You're going to qualify for max Pell. So there's much more predictability. Now, a higher income means less Pell. Doesn't mean no Pell. But it's all about college affordability. So looking at those poverty tables, I find a lot of reassurance that our students who are incarcerated, and often our students who are freshly coming home and want to attach to education, are going to be in good standing to receive Pell Grants for their education. How you complete the FAFSA, I'm more of an expert on the paper FAFSA than the others because I support students who are inside. And the how you complete a FAFSA is just a blast. But I'm going to be doing a public webinar. I just put the link in the chat later this week on the 31st that'll walk people through that. I'm working with several colleges that'll be presenting with me. So anyone's able to join that. But hopefully this gave you a little bit of an overview of financial aid. Tell me what I'm missing and what questions you have.
Sheila, I've got a question. So we had several instances where students started inside and filled out the FAFSA, were part-time or full-time, whatever, and then wanted to get out and continue their schooling. But the cost differences because of campus fees and whatever were so different that it almost made it impossible to transition right out into college. Is that being worked on? Is there some sort of fix on that?
Well, I think the fix comes to being conscious of what the college cost is, first of all. So if let's say you made it halfway through an associate's degree, you're going to find it a lot less expensive to finish your associate's degree at a low-cost college or a community college than you will going to a very high expense private school. So similarly to any student on the outside, colleges can cost from this much to this much. There's a huge range of cost differences. But what's important is to apply to a range of colleges, having the FAFSA results sent to that range of colleges, and then look at what their package says. So remember, at a college, you may find ways to reduce what it costs you. You may be able to find some colleges that support open education resources, so you're not paying for textbooks. You may have to work just like outside college students do to help supplement your college amount. If you can lower your living expenses by living with somebody else, that can help you lower your college expense. But there still will be colleges that have a tremendously high tuition rate. And there are times, and again, this happens to students on the street too, that you have to change your selection of college. But you don't do it automatically. You apply to a range of colleges, both financial and academic selectivity, because some of those most expensive private schools have massive internal resources of their own in endowments and may have institutional aid and scholarships that you will qualify for, that you have to apply for, you have to have conversations about. But usually all the applicable scholarships are listed on the school's website. But you want to have, we talk about in academics, we talk about your reach schools, your target schools, and your safety schools. That's academics, but you want to think about the same thing financially. You want to think about the most affordable, which are usually public, and then other levels, and see what that college might be able to offer you as a financial aid package. Because now when you're outside, just like students, other students who are outside and have been outside forever, you'll have all the other instruments. You'll have loans available to you, you'll have work, etc. So
and a lot of times
it's not just Pell when you're on the outside.
Yeah, and that's what I'm thinking. On the inside, we're really limited on what programs are available. So it might be one community college that is in my facility. And so I don't have access to the information for several different colleges. And so I'm almost, I almost have to go to that same college when I'm released, because that's the only information I have. And we found that just the difference in textbooks, for example, I mean, those are, a lot of them are subsidized in the facilities, but then I get out and I've got to pay for my textbooks now. I've got to pay for these library fees or whatever. And there's just enough difference that we had several guys had to drop out upon release because they couldn't cover those different costs.
Yeah, and I think that's an awfully important point, Trip. But I would say this. First of all, if you are at the lowest level of need, there are usually things like vouchers available through financial aid for books that help pay those. You can't just look at this and say, I'm going to get the same level of Pell I got in the inside, because Pell is going to be just one level of what's available. And you need to go sit down with the financial aid office at your target school and say, here's my situation. I'm going to need more assistance. What is available? The other thing you can do when you're on the outside is look for organizations that help with college access and success. There are many, many organizations. TRIO is an example. I see Brenda Dan Messier here. There are many access and success organizations that help support students who are financially challenged and help them both attain college and then succeed in college. And the other thing, and Kimberly just dropped something in the chat too, there's a lot of work happening to make sure that you've got more information available to you about transfer, because you shouldn't feel trapped that you can only go to one college. And one of the best interest of students measures for PEPs, as we start to implement PEPs, is that transfer information and career planning guidance and things must be available to people who are inside. Because many people who are inside at whatever the one college is that was serving that prison may go home to 4 hours away in another part of the state. They can't go to that college, but they need support with understanding how their credits will transfer to other locations. And that's something you have a right to have, and you have a right to ask for from your college program. Any other questions? Not, I'm going to go back to Judith.
Thank you for that. Actually, yeah, I've seen a lot of the troubles that come with not even having a history of taxes because you've just been home. And so you're coming home from incarceration, you're not going to have a history of taxes. And how do you even apply for that when it's asking you for, history? Do you put no? Do you put zero? Do you put, you don't have any history? And
Well,
that's
the nice part now is that if you didn't file taxes, and you don't have to if you're under a certain income level, you just say, I did not file. It will automatically, once you provide consent, go to the IRS. They'll say, yep, didn't file. And you won't even be asked asset questions online. It's going to be much smoother once the implementation's complete.
All right. Well, thank you, Sheila, for this. Again, I've struggled with it. My kids have struggled with it, and I've struggled trying to explain it to them or, help them fill it out. So, and I can imagine, people coming home, the struggles they're going to have, particularly like Trip mentioned, going from one source of setup inside, and now they don't have access to that to continue on with their schooling on the outside. So there's a lot of areas that need to be worked on, but I appreciate that, we're headed in the right direction, and knowledge is key and its power to ensure that we know what we're doing and we know how we are trying to make these process better. I see Jay has a question.
Hey, Sheila, thank you for that overview and providing that really critical information. I mean, what you just provided is a course inside of itself. So thank you for sharing that information to the larger group and anybody. And there's a lot of people who didn't show up, but we do have the recording, so it'd be good to disseminate that. But one of the things that you talked about that I have been advocating with the group for quite some time. I remember once Pell, when we realized that Pell was going to get reinstated, we sent out some polls to ask people, what is it that we should work on? And amongst the steering committee, I told them that we need to make sure that we're trying to get states, to allocate funding back for this stuff. And when the larger group voted on it, it was very low on support, and I knew what happened. A lot of well-meaning, intention of Pell's back wall, but people who don't run prison education programs don't realize that Pell was not going to take care of all of the people's problems. So I was kind of glad that you were centering that, but it's something that I think that we need to, send out, repoll, but it's really critical. We had this major victory at the federal level, but there's a lot of states that do not have that state financial access, and we need to start advocating to get that released because, again, I don't want to put it out there, but there's a couple the second chance Pell sites that are going to be, that I got partnerships with, that they're going to be teaching out because when they look at it, it's not sustainable enough. So they're going to be closing their programs down, not even letting any new students in, just the ones that they have. They're going to get them to their associate's degree, and they're going to be pulling out. So, we saying, yay, Pell for all, and, not really understanding that we need to do more. And that state funding, that needs to probably be at the top of our list. I've been saying this for a few years now.
Yeah, and it does take, and it's a state by state piece of work with advocacy and effort. I know when we got it returned in New Jersey, it was probably 1.5 to 2 years of legislative meetings, but and executive meetings at the state level, justifying, explaining, calculating, before we got to a vote to return it. And it is a lot of legwork, and the advocates are the only ones that are going to do it.
Thank you for that question, Jay. And you're right, there's still a lot more work that needs to be done. And so this is why we need to continue on. And it brings me to remind you guys or let you guys know that one of the reasons why we're going up to DC to Hill Day, a Hill Day event, is to advocate for access to higher education. Both for pay equity so that we can afford classes inside, to advocate for digital equity so that we can receive classes properly, and also for loan forgiveness. So there's many issues that still surround, access to higher education, equitably inside and on the outside. And with that, I will bring and thank you, Sheila, that was phenomenal. And I know that there's a lot more questions are going to come about, as people begin to now complete these forms. So if you want to put maybe your email on the chat so that they can reach out to you for specifics, if that's okay. If not, they can reach out to either Mickey or myself. I'll put mine on the chat. As well. And we have them all there. You can reach out to us if you have further questions. We only have 5 minutes left, so I want to bring it on to our subcommittees and chairs. And I want to remind you guys that if you're interested in getting involved with this work and the work at the state level, federal level, or even the events that we're working on, please reach out to our subcommittees. And I will bring it to Mickey, who is the chair of our Media and Messaging Subcommittee, for the latest developments.
Perfect. Thank you, Judith. We've been working very, very hard this month. We're expanding our operations. As you can see, we're constantly working across social media. I love emailing you guys. I'm the person you're talking to when it says unlock higher education. And we've expanded out to subcommittee reminder emails. We're furthering that out with a new email system and eventually our own separate YouTube channel so we can broadcast these meetings, broadcast COBE training, and continue adding to the offering that we can give you as we expand out into our own organization in the breadth of the organizations that support us. Thank you.
Great, and I will give you an update real quick on the membership and fundraising subcommittee. We are getting involved this year in fundraising opportunities and possibilities. So if you guys know of any good funders, any opportunities that you can let us know, we'd appreciate that. If you want to join our subcommittee, again, not only for the membership that we continue to grow, as I'd like to say, we've had an increase over 100 individuals join in the past year. So we're excited about that growth. Now we need to make sure that we are implementing the goals that we have for this year. And one of them is fundraising. So if you know of places that we can, target for fundraising opportunities, appreciate you sharing that. If you want to be involved in the subcommittee, we welcome you. And with that, I'll also let you know for the event subcommittee, because these subcommittees really all work hand in hand, work together in what we are doing. This year, we're looking for March 21st to go to Hill, the Capitol Hill, and to ensure that we are advocating for those goals that I just mentioned, the goals of digital equity, the goals of access to education on the inside, that it's appropriate for our curriculums. And digital equity is one of the things that is going to bring that opportunity, right? The goal for equitable pay so that we can afford to have these classes, to take these classes, because we are unable sometimes to even leave work when you're inside and you're getting paid so little, right? To survive on the inside, a lot of people don't have the opportunity to leave work to be able to take classes. So we want to make sure that they have that opportunity. The classes are available for everybody, as well as classes that are appropriate. As Tripp mentioned, what those classes look like inside were not necessarily what they look like when they were outside. And so there's that difference that we want to make sure that it's equitable inside, and similarities that are the same inside and outside. And finally, for our state and federal subcommittee, I'll bring Sheila on again just real quick, because again, we're all working in one mission, one vision, and one goal, and it's to unlock the opportunities of higher education. Sheila and Cece have combined this next couple of months, the state and federal subcommittee, because we are working very closely together. There's a lot of work being overlapped, and so Sheila can report on both of them this time.
Sheila, can't hear you.
Would help if I unmuted. Thanks, Brenda. I said I'm not going to talk very long because we've got a team working both to structure the asks that we are doing, and we have a Hill Day date planned on March 21st. We are anxiously hoping that the membership committee will give us some names as well as a trust really soon, because we want to be able to firm up plans for who's coming, when they're coming, what they're saying, because it is not that far from now.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And if you or your organization may be interested in joining in this partnership, when it comes to advocacy, when it comes to pushing for policy change, when it comes to going out there and speaking to our legislators regarding the importance of unlocking higher education for individuals on the inside and individuals coming home, please reach out to us. You have our emails on there. You can send your information and we will get back to you so that we can see how we can work together. Again, this is a platform for you guys to come in, not only learn for what best practices may look like, but also for you to bring your information, your knowledge, and your expertise so that we can all grow better from this. Okay. And so with that, any questions? Nope. So I will see you guys next month. We will have another speaker coming in next month as well, again, to continue the importance of furthering access to higher education. I hope to see you then. You guys have a wonderful rest of the day. Okay.